I know it's a peculiar subject for the times. I never really, I don't know. I didn't really expect to be talking about this, but then once I started thinking about it, I thought, well, I better. It's in the Bible, and it's one of those things that tend to be avoided. But I thought, well, we'll talk about this a couple of Sundays. Not a usual, it's not a usual subject. Generally, it's avoided. It's the same thing we were talking about last week, the occult, and it just doesn't really seem the season for it. But here we are. Today I'll talk a little bit about familiar spirits. And the funny thing about one of the curious thing about it is that the Hebrew word for familiar spirit is bottle. And well, that's so I remember this one guy, this one commentator, he said, well, the bottle is because that's what it sounds like when a person when a spirit, a controlling spirit is speaking out of a person, it sounds kind of hollow like that. And Isaiah, he got pretty sarcastic about it in chapter 8 and verse 19. He says, and when they shall say to you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, Ursula has great powers. Say it like that. The bottle effect, right? The guys, all right, maybe. I think it's sarcasm myself, but I guess they sound like that. I don't know. I've never actually ran into somebody who was possessed, but we're liable to, So anyway, according to one source, see, there's about 1 million practicing witches in the U.S. and 200,000 of them live in New York alone. These guys they're into it. They're doing this stuff. And it's there's way more people than that involved in it. That's just, one estimate. That they have others are doing not just, tarot cards and other forms of divination and things like that, that don't even call themselves witches, but they're into it. And they're using their contact with the spirit world for personal empowerment. And the use of the occult, see, the effort spent into reaching for these spirits, for the spirit world, it's growing by leaps and bounds. This is taking over. Our churches are shrinking, and the witchcraft churches, covens, they're expanding. This is the way. It's in our government. We've talked about that before. It's in European governments. This is very, it's not even unusual anymore. Remarkable from my point of view, but not unusual. The instances of demonic possession, they're increasing all over. The Catholic Church, they have classes on how to train priests to deal with that, and they're having to put on extra courses, because they don't have enough priests to deal with it. I'm not talking about the undeveloped nations either. I'm talking about the developed nations. Africa, the people, in India, they've always had that trouble. You can, missionaries that go there, remember, Brother Battelle, he could tell you some tales. It was difficult to get him to talk about it, but he would. He saw stuff. And there was a famous anthropologist, Margaret Mead. She attended one of these ceremonies where the spirits came in and possessed her, and she said, "Oh, it's wonderfully liberating. Everybody should try it." That's what she says. So yeah, right. But anyway. So this stuff's happening. We might as well get used to it. And another reason is to get us out of the idea that this is mythology. It's not. The scripture covers this ground fairly extensively, and it's true. Last week we glanced at the prohibition against the use of the occult in Deuteronomy 18:9-14. And we noted that God said these practices are an abomination, to me. You guys, view them that way as abhorrent, and and this was a capital crime back then. You'd kill witches back then. You'd stone them to death if you found them. You can't do that because it's going to infect your whole society, and we'll get to that in a bit. Now we talked about the magicians Janus and Jambres. Last week. Those are the two that opposed Moses and Aaron when they went before the Pharaoh. And remember, they were able to duplicate the plague. See, that in the way the Bible talks about it, they were able to do it. It wasn't trickery. The power was real. It wasn't sham. It wasn't fake. These guys were not fake magicians. They were the genuine product, the genuine thing. The power's there. The Bible doesn't deny that. It's real. Okay? But see, I'm going to say some stuff that witches are going to find offensive. And I'm happy about that. It doesn't bother me at all to talk like this. I don't mind offending people who dabble in the occult. But there's something that you need to know about all this that's happening. Now, the first thing is, I don't care what they say. In all the universe, spiritual side, physical side, there's only two kingdoms, and that's all. There's just two. And there's no neutral ground in this universe, in the creation. None at all. The kingdom of Jesus and the kingdom of the serpent, that's all there is. The kingdom of light, the kingdom of darkness, and there's no third choice. See, and we need to toughen up on this and not let people slide when they claim to not be devil worshipers. And okay? See, all power actually does belong to Jesus. That's his. However, for his purpose, right now, God is allowing the devil to exercise power in his own name. The devil exercises his power in his name. Still borrowed power, just the same. He does not now, never has had power of his own. But his power, even if it is borrowed, it's real. It's genuine. And it's limited only by the will of God. See, that's why Satan has to lie his followers into doing his will. He doesn't have all power. He has to lie us into wars and lie us into, he would like to kill us all directly, but he can't. He's not allowed to do it. Just like, remember, he killed the children of Job directly. God allowed him to do that. Okay. And if he could, he'd just kill us all. But he has to use the human beings as proxies to do stuff for him. But the power, such power as he is allowed to exercise, is genuine, real, honest-to-goodness power. Now, I know and understand that witches claim not to worship Satan. That's a hollow claim. That is baloney. Okay. If you're not in one kingdom, then you're in the other. There's no other alternative. If your allegiance isn't to Christ, then your allegiance is so to Satan. And if you're not using the power of Christ by praying to him, then you are using the power of the devil. And by using his power, the power of the occult, you are giving your allegiance to the devil. That's to all you witches out there. Doesn't matter whether or not you use his name. Makes no difference whatsoever. You're still using the power of his kingdom, and the devil was a liar from the beginning. And those that use the power of his kingdom have just bought into his lie. And we Christians, as Christians, we need to keep that in mind. We need to be very stubborn about it. There is no third choice, no matter what anyone says. If somebody who deals with the occult claims to not worship the devil, he's either deceived or he's lying. That's all. There's nothing else. We don't need to put up with any nonsense like that. So don't give it a sniff. Somebody can claim that. They do. You'll go online and you can find all kinds of witches there claiming, oh, I'm just a priestess of the earth or something. Baloney. That's all baloney. So don't pay attention to that. Now I want to say something about the enchantments and that warlocks and the magicians of every stripe. These enchanters, they find this talk like this offensive, and that's good. It should be, and it is offensive, and I intend it to be. I'm not sorry about saying this stuff. There's something about it, though, that enchantments and magic and tea leaf reading, see, that nobody ever talks about. And I'm going to point it out. There's an underlying principle to all this stuff that, and here it is. See, magic has absolutely no practical use whatsoever. There's nothing there. See, as far as nobody ever talks about that. But as far as practical usefulness is concerned, magic's worthless. It never does anybody any good, ever. And that's where the true lie of the occult is. It does have power to do signs. You can do signs. It has the power to do things that science can't explain. See, but the lie of all of that is that whatever signs and wonders that are ever done by the use of the dark arts, they never help anything. It never has any down-to-earth use. Look, you can't use magic to run your house. You can't use it to build a bridge or dig a ditch. You got to use backhoes for those. You can't use it to wash the dishes or fold the clothes. That is Merlin notwithstanding and sword in the stone. Forget that. That's not true. It didn't happen. Okay. You can't use it to make gold or find it or anything. Take Janus and Jambres. We're going to use those guys for an example. See, remember how Aaron's staff, it turns into the serpent, or it turns the Nile into blood. We'll go to that one. It turns Nile into blood, right? Okay, and so Janus and Jambres, they step up at Pharaoh's behest, and they turn some water into blood also. Okay, they duplicate it, see? Now, the thing of it is that you got to ask yourself a question that Pharaoh should have asked too. He says, what good is that? How does that help? How did duplicating the miracle of turning the water into blood improve anything? Why didn't Pharaoh ask the same question? Don't know. Why didn't they? You know what would have helped? If they could have reversed the plague. Why don't you take some bloody water and turn it into good water? Now, that would be impressive, and it would be helpful. Magic don't help. That's why. It doesn't help. If you guys are so all-powerful, see, why aren't you just duplicating what's already been done? There's enough blood, got plenty of that. We need water. Can't do that. Say, why don't you go Moses one better? Turn the Nile back into fresh water. I would be impressed. See, what good is magic that can only copy a disaster? That just makes it worse. See, and so where are the magicians that can reverse disasters? They don't exist. There aren't any. See, and you know why? Because magic is never beneficial. It doesn't work that way. It's a principle there. The power is there, all right, but it's the pretended benefits of the magic that is the lie. That's where the lie is. Let me get this here. That's where the illusion is. See, in the end, after all that blue lightning comes out of your fingertips and the smoke goes up and then the wind finally removes the smoke, you know what you have? Nothing. There's nothing there. You got nothing. See, and that's it for all you witches and warlocks. You got nothing. It's real. Magic is real in the sense that bowls of water can scoot across the table. There was Bill knew a preacher that claimed that he saw that happen. Can be made to move without hands. Sometimes people can even levitate a few inches, I guess. But you know what? If you ever want to go anyplace, you got to get in a car or an airplane or a bus. You're not going to levitate yourself over to Santa Rosa. It's not going to happen. You want to get warm? You turn on a heater. If you want to get, if you want to find yourself hungry or naked, you go down J.C. Penney or Safeway. That's what you do. You don't use magic for that because it's not usable for that. Now, like it's all fluff and huff. It's like Simon the sorcerer. He has everybody fooled, even himself, until he runs into real power of the Holy Spirit. Right? Okay. That's what you got to keep in mind. It's not useful. It's baloney that way. See, that's the thing that nobody ever talks about. There's no practical use for the occult other than stroking one's ego. You can do that. With tiny useless phenomena. In the end times, when the Antichrist shows up, you know what he's going to have? He's not going to have little tiny useless phenomena. He's going to show great, big, huge useless phenomena. But there's still going to be lying wonders, no matter how big it is. Doesn't make any difference. But it can do real damage. You don't doubt that. Now you look, just think about God whenever he does his work. Think about God, He exercises power, and so he parts the Red Sea. That's real helpful when you're trying to get away from Egypt, when Pharaoh's chasing you with all the army. Manna, it was super practical alternative to starving in the desert. Shoes and clothing not wearing out, that's practical. That was worthwhile. Calming the water in the storm on Galilee, that was useful. feeding the 5,000 with a few loaves and fishes so that people wouldn't faint on the way home. That's practical. That's the way it is when God uses his power to work miracles. Widows' sons get brought back to life. Demons get cast out. Blind, they get their sight. They can see. And you know what the most practical, useful exercise of the power of God is? To forgive our sins. That's supremely practical. That's the most useful thing in the world. Okay. Now, I want to talk about familiar spirits. Well, I won't get my cup back out. Familiar spirits. For those of you who've never seen Star Wars, or have seen Star Wars, remember when the evil emperor gets thrown into the pit, and he's descending down, all this blue lightning's coming out of his fingers, or Kung Fu Panda. Has anybody ever seen Kung Fu Panda? You know, and so here's this Tai Lung, has this blue glow coming out of his paws as he's fighting the dragon warrior. See, that's all just Hollywood stuff. See, these are special effects. They give the impression that the forces, that's quote, forces of the occult, like the dark side of the force, you know, that kind of idea. It gives the impression that magic and incantations are using something like a spiritual form of electricity, something that can be controlled and used like electric currency. But the fact is, when you have to use a spell or symbols or pentagrams or offerings and sacrifices, that should give you a clue as to the nature of the forces you're actually dealing with. Take a look at this passage in Hebrew 1:7. It's on the screen. And of the angels he saith, who makes his angel spirits and his ministers a flame of fire. I'll leave that up there for a second. See, electricity is part of our physical world. It's not the spiritual. I don't know that electricity works in the spiritual world. You know, we have 3.2 liter engines to propel 2,500 pound cars to get around. That's what we use. We smelt iron and aluminum and copper to make cars and bridges and skyscrapers. We program computers with billions of lines of programming to direct our communication systems. But we don't have to use any kind of ceremony involving butchered chicken guts to turn on our coffee pot. The coffee pot, you just turn it on. We don't need to draw some special symbol on a plug to get electrical power out of it. See, we just build the right conditions, and copper wire, generator, and something to turn it on, and out comes electrical power. It works for everybody all the time. That's it. See, we're not making some kind of a deal with some kind of being to get this stuff to work. It works because God set it up that way, and we've set up the correct conditions for it to all work. It all works, okay? Works all the time, works for everyone. We're not witches. See, but a witch or a warlock, he does have to use an incantation. He's got to. He's got to make some kind of a deal precisely because the power he wants to contact and control are, in fact, living, conscious beings. It's like those. They're not mechanical constructs, not lightning, you know. For those who want to use magic or divination or use the occult some way or other for whatever purpose, there's no escaping this one overriding fact, and this is true, that each and every one of those spirits that you touch and you engage, they are without exception malevolent spirits. They're not there for your benefit. They hate you. That malevolence, it's a logical necessity because there's only two kingdoms, and those kingdoms are at war. Kingdom of Satan is hostile to God. God's kingdom is hostile to Satan. Next thing I want to point out about familiar spirits is that they're leeches on the soul. Luke 11:24. I'll let you read that. But look how Jesus describes the journey of a familiar spirit. Okay? That he's left the person that he inhabited, and he walketh through dry places, and he seeks rest, but he doesn't find any, right? Now, whatever reason this unclean spirit has for wanting to reside in somebody's soul, it's apparent that it's better for him to be inside than it is to be outside, right? Now, I don't know why that is, but I don't need to know why that is. I only need to know that it is. That is true. Now, the point is that the familiar spirit does, for whatever reason, he desires to inhabit a body. And it's also for sure that he's not there to just be benevolent. That's not his reason for being there. He's there for himself. Since he doesn't want to be cast out, he'll always seek to control. He will always leech whatever soul he inhabits. And those who have, Hitler is an example of that, those who have had familiar spirits and have come out of that, they're going to confirm this. They're going to say the same thing. It can be difficult to get rid of familiar spirit after it's moved in. Sometimes it'll completely take over a person's personality, totally and completely. And that was the case with the Gadarene demoniac. That's in Mark 5, 8 through 9. And then we're going to have to move right along here. I'm not going to read that. But just look down at the very last phrase there, or second to last phrase, and he'd see him clothed and in his right mind. That was a guy that had been being ran by his familiar. Now, one last thing before I wrap it all up. Just as Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light, see, these spirits can disguise themselves as angels of light. They can disguise themselves as benevolent spirits. They can disguise themselves as even benevolent aliens from the stars. There's many associations, big clubs for those people who claim to have seen and even been abducted by aliens. There's thousands of attendees for this. This happens all the time. See, and so I have a book here if anybody's interested in borrowing it, but it's Alien Intrusion by Gary Bates. It's an old book, but the research is still valid. So in it, this guy notes that there's no known case among the many thousands of cases. You can interview person after person who's experienced some kind of abduction. There's no known case of a fundamentalist Christians ever having that experience. Doesn't happen to us. Just doesn't. Okay? But there have been many cases where a person who's actually a non-believer, where this process has begun to happen to him, where he's frightened, and he calls on the name of Jesus. And the second that happens, the process quits. Right then, it's over. Okay? There's power in the name. Anyway, see, the Bible does cover the subject of the occult and familiar spirits and all that. And considering the days that we live in, we ought to have at least some knowledge. And there might become a time, it's like happened to my brother Bill, that when a friend who's been messing around with this stuff and gotten burnt by it, they're going to ask you about this stuff. You're going to need to know this. You're going to need to know this. And you should at least be able to listen with some understanding of this problem. And you also know, we also know as Christians, we know two of the major fears of the demons. The one is, of course, the main one is the fear of the name of Christ. And the other is the fear of the abyss. Remember that Legion guy? And as a bride in flesh, see, and bone of Christ himself, that's who we are. We're not just insignificant meat bags, blood bags, down here. That's not us. We're the bride, the flesh and bone of Jesus himself. That's what he calls us. And so you have actually far more power than you probably realize that you have. Okay. And the last thing Satan and his minions want is for you to consider actually exercising that power. See, and that's why they avoid Christians whenever they can. So anyway, it's time for the invitation. In this case, the invitation is to a practical God, to the God of manna, to the hungry, to the God of sight to the blind, to the God of forgiveness to the sinner. Practicality. God is practical, not just up on the throne, but he's really with us and deals with real problems. Okay, Benny.